Easy. It's gone now.
But we still haven't found anything.
And we won't, not in the dark.
Hello my fellow friend sets, it's Chris from Shughead Gaming. Happy Halloween! And here's my review for Blair Witch Oculus Quest Edition. Developed and published by Bloober Team and releasing for, like the title says, the Oculus Quest and Quest 2. October 30th, 2020 for an approximate price of $25, but of course, that depends on your region. Blair Witch Oculus Quest Edition, screw it, I'm calling it Blair Witch VR. Plays in the sandbox of lore created by previous films, taking the Blair Witch game that released across various platforms last year and recrafting it specifically for VR. Perfectly timed for Halloween, this original Blair Witch narrative looks to be a great VR experience for Quest users looking to shit their pants in 2020. Is this the laxative we wanted, or does it simply get lost in the woods? Stick with me while I tear it apart and find out. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button. Not only helps out my channel, but VR gaming as a whole. And if you'd like to see more VR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. Let's kick things off with a look at graphics. Practically rebuilt for VR, Blair Witch VR is the same game you might have seen in its flat form. However, it is designed now to run on the Quest and Quest 2 hardware. And while an extremely impressive port considering the hardware, concessions had to be made, and concessions there are. Starting in the daytime, Blair Witch VR is not at its strongest, showing all of its VR shortcomings at once. Looking like a forest fire just blew in, the forest is overly hazy as it attempts to hide its limited draw distance. Unfortunately, even with that, pop-up can still be seen, with textures and entire objects popping in and out of view, an issue that plagues the OG Quest significantly more than the Quest 2. Another victim of the port to VR is the authenticity of the forest, which was a highlight in the flat version. Here, on both the Quest and Quest 2, foliage throughout can visibly be seen drastically reduced, flattened, and simplified. This, when combined with an overall reduction in lighting and particle effects, along with some fairly aggressive foveated rendering, and Blair Witch VR pales significantly to the visuals seen in the flat versions, coming off most closely to the Switch version. But this is VR, and immersiveness can go a long way to offsetting superior visuals. Thankfully, much of the Blair Witch takes place in the darkness of night, in which almost none of the above criticisms apply. And it is here where Blair Witch in VR plants its flag in the ground. Graphical shortcomings aside, Blair Witch VR looks pretty sharp in both headsets, with the OG Quest actually looking a little bit better because of its true blacks. With only your flashlight to see, Blair Witch in VR often plays on its strengths as you are completely surrounded by the empty unease of a dark forest you can't escape. The lighting effects of the flashlight are a little simple but nonetheless effective in their utilization, casting long shots of light that don't so much end as they are just enveloped by the darkness. Your only sense of comfort outside of this is Bullet, your trusted companion. Bullet isn't the most impressively modeled or animated in-game dog, but still exhibits enough authenticity and detail to quickly become your in-game security blanket, making his lifted up ears and waggy tail all the more effective when seen peeking through the darkness by your flashlight. And it is in moments like these and countless others where Blair Witch is able to use its minimalist visuals to sometimes give you hope, but more often than not immerse you in a sense of all-encompassing vulnerability and isolation that is at times so effective, I simply couldn't imagine playing this game in its flat form, regardless of visual downgrade. Sound is up next.
Come on, bring it to me, boy. Here, what'd you find?
Establishing already that immersiveness is where the Blair Witch shines, it is fortunate then that Bloober Team has delivered a sound mix that, while already a standout feature in prior versions, is here in VR taken to a whole new level. Detailed and dynamic, Blair Witch's sound design is a masterclass in how to use sound to manipulate the player. Almost completely void of traditional music, Blair Witch VR at first offers a false sense of security and comfort in the opening stages, presenting a forest filled with life and ultimately coming off rather peaceful. However, this quickly dissipates as darkness falls and the forest goes quiet, as if everything simply died. Comfort is replaced with dread and unease, as the sounds of nature are replaced with a dynamic mix of your footsteps, silence, low rumbles, and things going bump in the night just beyond your view. Truthfully, I found the game's tendency to go for jump scares with the sounds of things running past or breaking sticks in the bush at times a bit desensitizing, as they happened a little too often, but the game does have enough tricks in its bag of sounds to keep you on edge for a majority of the 6 to 8 hour campaign. With so much effort being put into sounds designed to make you anxious and uneasy, it is very welcoming to have Bullet, your trusty dog companion, often nearby, offering nervous growls to warn of impending danger, loud barks to keep you going in the right direction, and maybe most importantly, simply being with you and making you feel less alone. Some may find Bullet's continual dog commentary a bit grating, but I think most will find that when in game, you will come to rely on those sounds as not only a constant guide away from wandering aimlessly in the dark, but also as a great sense of comfort. In addition, I found Bullet to have enough variation in his sounds so that he rarely felt overly repetitive or simply spouting off sound bites. That being said, if you ignore Bullet and continue to run around in the dark, yes, he will continue to bark until you get back in line. And while this does promote less exploring, I think you will find the balance of direction and exploration a good one. As a narrative-driven game, voice acting is also done very well, and again, used just enough to move the story forward. VR is a perfect fit for horror games as it completely envelops the user, giving them no place to look away or hide. The sound mix here in Blair Witch VR demonstrates perfectly the role sound can play in this experience, and makes this one to definitely put earphones on for. And that brings us to gameplay. I'm going to break with the norm here and say that Blair Witch VR, in its most simplest form, is a game about the relationship between a man and his dog. This narrative-based horror game plays predictably with the Blair Witch lore and treads similar ground to other horror walking simulators, in which you go from clue to clue and set piece to set piece as the story unfolds. This is nothing you haven't seen or done before, but for me what separates the Blair Witch VR from other entries besides being, well, in VR, it is the way the game uses Bullet, your dog, in such an essential way. As a character with a traumatic past that suffers from PTSD, being alone in this forest isn't your strong suit, and as such your reliance on Bullet comes in more ways than one. For those looking for inventory management, character progression, or combat, know that this is not that game. Playing very much like the films, this narrative-driven game sees you trapped in a forest, solving puzzles and following a bread trail of clues, all while being stalked by a faceless force. Of course, this wouldn't be a Blair Witch story without some found footage. In Blair Witch VR, this comes in the form of videotapes you will come across. By viewing these in your camcorder, you will be witness to previous events, which must be analyzed and used to search for clues or to interact with your reality, using the rewind feature to undo certain events to various ends. Your camcorder will also serve you as a tool with its capacity to view your surroundings using night vision and infrared. This and your flashlight are your tools to survive, but it is Bullet that will be your most valuable asset, as he will often be tasked with directing you to clues, and once found will track their origin, essentially moving the story forward. In fact, it is Bullet that I found was often the sole reason that Blair Witch VR didn't devolve into a frustrating and confusing walk in the dark, barking at me when I was off the trail, growling when near danger, and letting me know when I was in the vicinity of something I needed to find or do. On the surface, this may seem a bit hand-holdy, but Blair Witch VR is very much an interactive movie in which you can control the outcomes depending on certain actions you take throughout. As such, being stuck on puzzles is not its priority, going as far as to even resurrect you upon your untimely demise if you fail to fulfill its specific objectives. That, however, does bring me to an area of frustration, as I found objectives were vague, as they may be told once and then never revisitable. Nothing to be said about the optional side missions I later found were in the game, but never really alluded to. This lack of transparency often led me to situations where I would walk up to Bullet and say, "Alright, what do you got?" Unfortunately, at times, Bullet was waiting for me to trigger him forward, which did make for some frustrating moments. However, as the game progressed, I found I started to learn the game's mechanics and work around Bullet's AI issues. As such, I got better at anticipating what the game expected from me. Blair Witch VR requires the use of 2 touch controllers. I found tracking to be mostly on point, with issues few and far between. In fact, I have heard other gamers claim this to be a glitchy mess of a game, an issue I never encountered, instead going as far to state that I found the overall experience very polished, outside of a few movement snags, commonplace with most full locomotion VR titles. This game can easily be played seated or standing, with options for both in the settings. A minimal amount of room is required here, and for those who might suffer from VR sickness, you will find optional click turning and blinders, both of which you may need here, as I could see the full movement when combined with the disorientating nature of the vast darkness, a cause for some discomfort. And finally, that brings me to fun factor in my final review. As a game that is void of combat and character progression, and instead relies on its sense of mystery and atmosphere to move you forward through its narrative, this is a game that will speak more to a certain type of gamer, and especially dog lovers. And as the horror genre is incredibly subjective depending on the individual, this game's fear factor is also up for debate. Case in point, I have friends that are scared of Ghostbusters. Well, I can sit and watch just about anything in and outside of VR and often laugh. Understandably stripped down visually from the flat versions, Blair Witch does come off a bit rough around the edges, but easily brushes this off as it doubles down on the immersiveness of VR in the dark and its impressive sound design. Honestly, this isn't really my type of game, as I'm much more into depth of gameplay mechanics than simply narrative-based games. That being said, Blair Witch VR does execute itself well and manage to keep me interested for its duration. There are supposedly a few different endings, but once was enough for me. As you guys know, I hate numbered review scores and instead rate games on a basis of buy it, burn it, or wait on it. For single-player VR games, there is Resident Evil 7 on the PSVR, and then a bunch of other games like Paranormal Activity, Exorcist Legion, Layers of Fear, Don't Knock Twice, and Dread Halls. This is certainly not even in the same realm that is the greatness of Resident Evil 7 in VR, but when compared to the others would actually be my game of choice, as it simply worked better in VR and offered a more dynamic experience. Horror fans that are okay with more of a walking experience and looking to get lost in a narrative, you are likely to love this. And if you enjoyed the Blair Witch movie, then this is certainly worth the full price. Honestly, I found this more interesting than the movie itself, as I think the game has better pacing, but if walking around in a dark forest while jumping at audio jump scares isn't your thing, then this game likely won't do anything for you, especially at full price. Regardless, this is a fantastic achievement on the Quest platform and is a nice addition to a genre that is a little light right now in the store. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. Thanks for stopping by. If you liked this video, please hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And if you'd like to see more VR content from me, please consider subscribing. And for video updates, you know the deal, hit that bell icon. I will catch you guys on my next video.